I got a comment last week that said, I hope you'll cover animators' distinguishing traits again and how you identify them, which of course was a large part of my videos back in the Dragon Ball Super days. Part of the reason that was possible was because Super had basically no time for corrections, so all of those idiosyncrasies were always visible. And well, I also started making videos with episode 65. I'd already had a year and a half to work out many people's traits. It took a really long time, especially with how unknown a lot of the animators were back then. They very rarely posted confirmations on social media, if they were even on there at all, and Sakugaboru was nowhere near as utilized by the industry as it is now. It was still just people guessing. On the whole, it was just me going through frame by frame every week, desperately stitching together commonalities between staff lists and scenes. I was always really proud of that work, and so a lot of those videos were often me just explaining the torture I went through to reach those discoveries. The landscape has changed a lot since then. More than ever, animators are on social media confirming scenes and answering people's questions. It's taken a lot of the need to guess out of the equation, and with this being such a correction-heavy show, it's much less easy for me to point out tangible art traits from individuals because it all just looks like the Chief AD style. I have to talk about timing in its place, which I do to an extent when I talk about the flow of a scene, whether it's bouncy or snappy or what kind of line work they like, but trying to explain how something moves from a technical level isn't quite as compelling or easy to understand as pointing out funny mouths or smears. So while I might not be able to do that with key animators in quite the same way yet, the chief animation directors on this show are just the all-stars of modern Dragon Ball staff. I know them really well, and I can absolutely go through some of them today. The chief AD for this episode is Yuya Takahashi, arguably the most well-known and beloved animator of the modern Dragon Ball era. When he first got to supervise an episode on Super, immediately people were drawn to his very classic 90s era art and the deep three-tone shading and Terminator lines. His departure from Super's model sheets caused a ripple in the community, and you couldn't move for people imitating his style for so long, which actually makes his approach on Daima all the more funny because it's extremely on model. Of course, you will still find the indented cheek shading here and there, but otherwise he's actually more on model than even the designer of the show. When I first saw Goku's character sheets for Daima, I was really taken aback by just how much some of the faces reminded me of Masahiro Shimanuki. They have quite wide and boxy heads, and separate from Shimanuki, the huge eyes and especially the shape of them are just completely detached from any other era of Dragon Ball. So far, Takahashi is the only person who has completely internalized these designs. Again, not even the guy who drew these, Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, draws like these sheets. I'm telling you, look for Goku shots in this episode that look like the sheets started walking and you'll know for sure it's Takahashi. Keep an eye out for those boxy-headed Gokus where the eyes will have grey shadows on them and the ears have these kind of floating shadows outside the lines. He's basically the only person drawing like this so far, and I just find that so funny that Takahashi of all people is the on-model guy now. Of course, he does still have his departures. I don't know that it's necessarily the most fitting for child characters, but he really goes hard in layering up the shading. He seemed to find real comfort in adding these deep shadows around the eyes, and often isn't afraid to drop in 3 tones, something that's quite rare for Daima. I think the most he actually felt recognizably like his old stuff was the shot of Goku that references Toriyama's manga, but kind of filters it through Daima's style. The indented cheek shading and the 3rd tone under the chin are very him, but personally, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I don't think it really works. Kid Goku's design and the tone of these episodes just isn't really the place that I think this stuff fits. So when you combine that with the fact that I don't really love Goku's character sheets, I don't love the shading approach, and Takahashi as an AD is actually kind of loose, leading to some iffy shots slipping through. So far, he's actually my least favorite chief AD right now. Isn't that crazy? Of course, by Daima standards, having a least favorite is pretty meaningless. It's all really well drawn, and so it just comes down to personal style preference, but it's a very strange thing for me to say out loud. My favorite corrections on this show so far have actually been from Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, who pops up on every episode again as the top dog of the show, and finding him is really easy. I was telling my Discord server last week that he hasn't really changed how he draws ears basically ever. Shape aside, that ear hole is getting hatched in, often with deep black shading, despite colorists ignoring that so much on Daima. But do keep in mind that that's not always going to be the case, so don't get tripped up, because sometimes it's just hatching, and I can see people getting confused with someone like Shida who does the same thing. So at that point you have to fall back on other traits. The cut-through is super round, which is probably why he appeals so much to my personal tastes. His jaws are full-on circles, the eyes are rounder and noticeably small, the noses are these upside-down moons or button shapes, which stand in contrast to how most people draw them more to the side and a little more angular. If I put him side by side with some of the other ADs on the show, I think you'd be able to take that information and spot him pretty much immediately. It's still so funny to me that the character designer of the show is more off-model from the sheets than one of the chief ADs, at least as far as Goku goes, but I guess that's what happens when Toriyama steps in and redraws Goku. You just fall back on your personal style in the end. I'll touch on other styles in future episodes, but I want to jump into the content of this episode. The storyboard artist of this episode is... You know what, I'm not even going to say it, you know who it is. 5 boards in a row, and unfortunately, I don't think this is a particularly strong outing from Yashima. It's small scale, it's extremely flat. I found the whole thing to be carried by both the direction and the art direction. At the helm of this episode is Yuichi Suzuki, a young director trained up on Dragon Ball Super, who was an assistant on DBS Broly, and then was promoted with Digimon's reboot. His background is actually in compositing, which I think might contribute to the emphasis on cool lighting found in this episode, and even with that aside, it felt like the humor was right and the general tension and atmosphere was conveyed properly, which is a nice step up from last week that I felt was lacking in this area. The art director for Daima as a whole, aka the person in charge of the background art design, is Maya Kasai, and oh my god, is she great. I've been waiting for an opportunity to talk about the backgrounds in Daima, and now feels like the perfect time. They've been flawless. The various worlds, the items, the incredible environmental design, it cannot be overstated just how important background art is to the atmosphere of a show, and Kasai and her team have been on fire every single week. For a show where the wow factor of the world is a big selling point as the heroes venture through it, a lot of emphasis has to be placed on that background art quality, and so far they have not faltered. I cannot wait to see what they deliver as we delve deeper into this world. On the animation front, this was actually a fairly low-key episode. You have the usual high standard of character movement that Daima's been nailing so far. There's even an incidental creature animation that looks to be from Shuichiro Manabe. Big fan of that transition, but obviously the big emphasis is on the action at the end of the episode, which doesn't actually start very well. I appreciate it from a choreography point of view. It's so refreshing to see fights that aren't just all the time, but this is quite janky. The posing is really stiff, the timing's very linear, it's all slow and lacking in any kind of modulation. I think this could have been really cool, but I don't think the execution is good here, unfortunately. And it's easy to demonstrate that difference in execution because what follows is amazing. Which studio have been helping with cleanup on Daima, but here one of their in-house animators, Kozue, steps up and animates the rest of the fight. She straight up turns Goku into a smear and takes him through a series of insanely dynamic poses, modulating the amount of frames she uses to create these great eases in and out of the different speeds. She does such a great job of showing just how flexible you can make Goku's hair despite its typical stiffness, and the soft shapes of the clothing, oh my god, do they bring me back to Tate's work. I'm pretty sure I can even see some of Shintani's assistant AD work on the cut that follows, but of course the big Super Saiyan explosion has big intense Takahashi redraws, and that is definitely where his drawings really shine. Those impact frames and that hair shading, so him, such a delight. What an incredible way to debut on the Dragon Ball franchise. I really hope we see more of Kozue in the future. She was awesome. Until then, though, we have plenty to keep ourselves preoccupied with. Next week's episode is one I have heard a lot about. Not only will we apparently be free of Yashima's boarding, but this is supposed to be the series' first big action episode, I think. If that's true, then oh my god, I can't wait. We are long overdue a big action blowout at this point. I hope the style overview in today's breakdown video was enjoyable, and if you have any feedback or requests, please do leave a comment. I'm always open to cover what you want to see, but until then, be sure to rate the video, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you next time.